Hello again! It's been a while since my last ranking video. I got really busy these last few months, but I've been planning this video for a while now, so I'm glad to have finally made it. As I was thinking of song lists that I could rank, I thought of a 3D Zelda dungeon ranking. There's a good amount of them with all different songs, but it's not an overwhelming amount, so I knew I could do it in a reasonable amount of time. Unfortunately, I realized after the fact that 3D Zelda dungeon music isn't the most engaging music to listen to a lot of the time, for me at least. Most of it's much more ambient in nature, which isn't usually the style that I enjoy listening to. Even so, it's good practice for me to listen to many different types of music if I want to improve my composing skills as well. I want to make it clear that I don't consider the songs on this list to really be bad per se. The ranking is going to be 90% how much I personally enjoy the song, and 10% how good I think it works with the themes and settings it's in. So it's almost purely an opinion-based list. Keep that in mind when it seems like I'm being rather harsh with some of the entries. It's mostly just how much I would want to listen to the song on its own. As with my previous ranking video, I've made my own original song trying to replicate the Zelda dungeon style. It'll be played at the end of the ranking video along with the theming and explanation for my compositional choices, so stick around for that. The games I will be considering for this list are Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom. Only main dungeon songs will be ranked, so no mini dungeons like the Bottom of the Well or the Ice Cavern. With that being said, I have a perfectly even 50 songs to rank, so let's get started. Starting the list off, I want to explain something I like to call the Dodongo problem. You see, some Zelda dungeons do this thing where instead of having a fun and unique song that captures the theme of the setting, they'll instead have nothing. Ambiance and noise with nothing else. Dodongo's Cavern is the first 3D Zelda dungeon to have this, and as such, I label it as the poster child of this genre of dungeon theme. Yes, Dodongo's Cavern is just a cave, but there are ways to make a cave song more interesting than just wind and noises. The best and most memorable part of the track is the rising high-pitched noise and the low growl, as it sounds like a monster lurking nearby. Besides that, there's basically nothing here. Meet Potential Song. Dragon Rouge Cavern has the privilege of being on the island with one of the best songs in the entire series. It had so much potential to be an incredible song, and then it went and fell into the Dodongo problem. It's quite literally just Dodongo's Cavern, but with a bongo track playing through the whole song, and maybe an occasional timpani hit or lava bubble noise. An extreme disappointment compared to Dragon Rouge Island itself. What if we made Dodongo's Cavern again in the same game, but with piano sounds instead of monster sounds? What a terrible idea. There are a few entries on this list that split the dungeon into two entries because the dungeon has two different enough songs that I felt like separating them was necessary. Ganon's Castle Underground is different from the normal Ganon's Castle in that it is boring and has the Dodongo problem. Its only redeeming quality is the piano that makes the song slightly more interesting, but only barely. Most Twilight Princess dungeon themes start with a little jingle, and this is one of the most noticeable. Almost jump scare-like if you listen to it at high volumes. There isn't much going on in this track, metalworking sound effects and the main melodic part played on what sounds like some kind of tuned percussion. It has more of a melody and intrigue than the previous entries because of that, and besides that, it's just kind of boring. At least we're moving away from the Dodongo problem of there being basically nothing in the track, so that's nice. One of the many iterations of the Hyrule Castle / Ganon's Castle themes on the list. I'm not completely sure if that's the correct theme or motif to call it, but it's what I associate with Hyrule Castle and Ganon's Castle, so that's what I'm going to call it for the remainder of the list. The motif is used for a lot of the final dungeon-like areas, and this iteration feels solemn and empty. However, it's fitting for the final dungeon area of Twilight Princess, but it isn't that exciting or memorable to listen to, and it's also really short, shorter than almost every other song on the list. I remember watching my brothers play this game, and I only ever wanted to see them using the spinner because I thought it was so cool. Unfortunately, the song for Arbiter's Grounds is not as cool as the dungeon's item. It's generic spooky music. They could have done so much more with this theme. There are hints of really neat stuff when the guitar or oboe come in, but they leave just as quickly as they came. Something interesting to note, though, is that this song has almost the exact same noise as entering a cold area in Breath of the Wild with the slowing down wood block sound, so that was a cool detail. Despite not being a horror-themed dungeon, I think Lakebed Temple's theme would be the most fitting track to play in a horror game. There are weird breathing sounds throughout the song that can also pan to either ear to add to the spookiness. It doesn't feel like a water dungeon theme, however. You could probably swap this one with the Arbiter's Grounds theme and people wouldn't notice since they're really similar. It even has the same little guitar bit almost. The best part of the song is the very light percussion that sounds like raindrops that give the hint of the watery theme. It ranks this low because it's pretty boring to me. It's like Goron Mines and Arbiter's Grounds, but I like the vibes of this one more, hence it ranking slightly higher. Majora's Mask's dungeons have some of the most unique dungeon themes in the series. Snowhead Temple, however, pales a bit by comparison. We get a bit of the Dodongo problem here, with not as much besides sounds and ambiance. That is until the piano part kicks in. The piano in this track is iconic to me and very memorable, despite the lack of everything else in the track. Unfortunately, the piano only really has 2 things, and that's the 3 sets of 3 notes it does, and then a few higher note hits. Besides that, nothing. It feels desolate, which is fitting, but it's not nearly as engaging as the other Majora's Mask tracks. I think the theming for the song in the Forsaken Fortress is spot on. A militaristic snare being used for the army fortress location is very fitting and unique to this dungeon. Besides that, however, the song is rather repetitive. That is until it gets to the part with the super low strings which continually build up, which I think is rather neat. But it builds up to a whole lot of nothing. A big disappointment, but at least the theming is spot on. The very first 3D dungeon in Zelda. Ocarina of Time, I hate to say, doesn't have my favorite selection of tracks when it comes to the dungeons. That said, I think the inside of the Deku Tree is a fine track. It's a bit boring and not my favorite, but the woodwinds are very nice and fitting. The song as a whole has a very hollow feeling, which is great for being inside a hollowed tree. The use of heavy reverb matches the settings, and it still has a noticeable and recognizable melody despite how empty the song is. See, Dodongo? This is how you make a cave-like song work even with so little happening. The low strings acting as the bass in this song remind me eerily of that 3D animated music video with the marbles being shot out and hitting the strings. Like they sound identical and I can see the video in my head during the song. That aside, the track feels experimental. Like the strings are there to keep time and the rest of the instruments are just playing at random intervals, seemingly with no rhyme or reason. The wooden wind chimes sound was the coolest part because it fit the theme the best of the instruments. an organ solo as you approach the final boss of Ocarina of Time. This one being an organ solo only is actually really great because it's diegetic. At the top of the tower is a huge pipe organ which Ganon seemingly plays as you approach, meaning Link is actually hearing this song as he climbs the tower. That aspect of the song makes this version of the Hyrule Castle / Ganon's theme more engaging to me. It's rather short, and besides it being diegetic, there isn't much else to offer. The best of the 3 child dungeon songs to me from Ocarina of Time. It has a steady beat and creepy strings which are fitting. The one thing about this song that elevates its theming is the non-stop stomach noises. They are constant throughout the song and very unnerving. But they are unnerving in a way that makes me want to keep listening. It's very weird, but they still make me uncomfy. Wind Waker's take on another rendition of the Hyrule Castle / Ganon's castle theme. The piano isn't as interesting as the diegetic organ from Ocarina of Time, but the super funky voice synth with tons of modulations makes this one more interesting to listen to. It reminds me of tracks from Twilight Princess, which is neat considering both were made for the GameCube. The Shadow Temple leans heavily into the spooky vibes. The bongo-like backing track acting as foreshadowing to the boss is really cool to notice after encountering Bongo Bongo. Heavy use of choir to represent lost and tortured souls is also very thematic and fitting. You'll notice when listening that they almost always fade out while descending, as if they are being dragged down. On-point theming, but it can feel a little repetitive after a while. The track for City in the Sky is just funny to me. I think all the Aku noises are both thematically fitting and extremely goofy. The song itself gets a little repetitive, which is a shame since it's one of the coolest dungeon locations in the series. The extreme echo in all the instruments is a really nice way to represent just how far you are from Hyrule when you're in the dungeon. There's a distinct lack of low-end instruments to also exemplify that you are nowhere near solid ground in this dungeon, which is really cool theming. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom songs are a lot harder to judge than the other dungeon themes because they're so dynamic. They change depending on how far into the dungeon you are and what you're doing at any given time. What this means is they can be full of symbolism and way longer than any other dungeon tracks. The Great Wellspring of Hyrule is very beautiful, but it doesn't really have anything that hooks me. I like the bits where the choir parts get cut off, which seems to be a staple of Tears of the Kingdom songs. The strings that fly upwards are also quite nice. The instruments are all great. Being on modern hardware means all the instruments sound full of life and vibrant, making it hard to rank any of the Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild songs low. The issue I have with this one is that it's just not as memorable to me as the others. It feels more like a movie score than a dungeon OST. The track for the legendary Stormwind arc has a lot of references to other songs in the series. Early on, a lone piano has the Hyrule Castle motif, and as most people know, the boss theme in this dungeon is a huge reference to the Wind Waker. Other than song callbacks, this one is a bit of a forgettable track. The dungeon songs in Tears of the Kingdom are much longer than any of the other games, so a lot of space is filled up with just orchestral interludes, it feels like. They're very pretty and well made, they just aren't as memorable as the best parts of the track, that stray away from the orchestral normality with unique instruments or interesting editing. Having wind instruments cut out alongside the vocal parts and having some accordion to represent the Rito people is neat. This song has a bit more going on for it in terms of melody than the Wellspring, so it ranks slightly higher. For the Fire Temple, I decided to rank the version of the song without the chanting. That's the version heard in any release of the game besides the very original, so it seems like the more correct version to rank. While this isn't the version with the chanting, it still has a vocalization part in the same spots, and they sound effectively creepy. It might even fit better in the Shadow Temple with how creepy they sound, but I can imagine it's the cries of the trapped Gorons from how low it is. The bells that play occasionally are very nice, and they give the song a much needed high end. Something to note for all the Divine Beast tracks is that they have tons of symbolism. Every single one, from what I've read, have the SOS signals seemingly from the champions who died, and that's really cool. They also change drastically when you first enter compared to after activating the first terminal. After that, it just gains depth for each terminal activated. This is one of the rare dungeon tracks that leans more into the sadness of the environment rather than the scariness of it. The piano, iconic to Breath of the Wild, plays for practically the entire duration, and there are bells that come in with sad melodies. I enjoy when the song speeds up near the end of the dungeon with more percussion. It's a good song, but the other Divine Beasts offer more to me personally. What a fun first dungeon track for the otherwise depressing Majora's Mask. This song is very tribal and quick, lots of vocalizations and very fast percussion noises. There are tons of unique percussion instruments too, that keep both a steady beat and provide flourishes throughout. I like to imagine the vocals come directly from the dungeon boss, as Odalwa also makes a lot of noises during the boss fight. Tower of the Gods, more than any other song, sounds like it was put through a cassette or something to make it feel lower quality. I don't know why, but it just sounds way faker than any of the other Wind Waker songs. Is this a bad thing, however? It could be referencing how Hyrule is now centuries old below the water and represents a bygone era. Besides that, there appears to be references to Ganon's castle with the organ and chimes, and I also believe it shares some chords with it too. I like the Glockenspiel and Heart Parts the most, one of Wind Waker's better dungeon songs. I'm sorry, I've been keeping something from you. This isn't just a ranking video, it's also a Skyward Sword Glaze video. Skyward Sword is my favorite Zelda game, and it doesn't get the love it deserves. For example, it has amazing dungeon tracks. The weakest track from the game is this high up on the list as an example of what I mean. The Skykeep theme is good, but it doesn't do anything to stand out from other similar dungeon tracks. Choir and strings in a creepy-ish slow track. It does have more sections and never gets boring, so it has an edge over shorter and less varied tracks. It's also used for only like 4 rooms in the entire dungeon, so you don't even get to hear it for very long ever. At times, it feels like it's hinting at playing the main Zelda theme, which is cool and fitting for a final dungeon. very industrial, which is super unique for a water dungeon and very fitting for this dungeon specifically. I love how there are two main melody lines that sort of interrupt each other. They go against each other, which I interpret as representing the water changing direction, which is Great Bay Temple's main mechanic. In the last part of the song, the alien sounds from the Romani Ranch side quest show up, which feels like an odd inclusion, but it's not an unwelcome one. This is the final 3D Zelda dungeon as of this video because I don't really consider Hyrule Castle or the approach to Ganondorf as dungeons in Tears of the Kingdom. Did I do that just to have a perfectly even 50 songs for the ranking? Maybe. Moving on to the Construct Factory song, this is one of the most low-key of the Tears of the Kingdom dungeon themes, calmer with more focus being put on the tuned percussion instruments. I liked tuned percussion a lot, so I enjoy it. Besides that, it kind of reminds me of music you would hear in line at Disneyland. Something that's soothing, but it's in the background for a reason. It's meant to enhance the atmosphere more than be super catchy. Taking a note from Twilight Princess, this song starts with a jump scare piano slam. Va Naboris is a funky track. The sitar-like instrument is neat and the weird warbling noises are very nice too. Later on, however, the woodwinds come in and they elevate this track tremendously. Before the winds come in, I would probably label this as my least favorite Divine Beast track due to a lot more empty space being used, but the woodwinds save it. That last section is fantastic and very memorable compared to the rest of the song. Twilight Princess's Forest Temple definitely sounds more foresty than the Ocarina of Time Forest Temple, but it's not nearly as interesting. I like the repeated wood and mallet sounds a lot. They never get repetitive to me, and I just love mallets. The best part of the song is when the unique woodwinds come in and play just slightly out of key for a more wild feeling. One of the better Twilight Princess dungeon themes, thanks to having more going on through most of the song, even if the middle section can feel a little too empty at times. I consider Hyrule Castle to be the final dungeon of Breath of the Wild because it has a 3D map, which is my criteria for dungeons in Breath of the Wild. This is my favorite rendition of the Hyrule Castle / Ganon's Castle themes. The winds at the start are super pretty and they set up the rest of the song great. The song also includes a section with the same winds used at the start playing Zelda's theme, which is a fantastic addition. The organ and piano iconic to the Hyrule Castle motif are present and they make the song truly feel like a finale. A haunting track, perfect for Twilight Princess. The music box used in this track, I think, is one of the best decisions made. This is a place trapped, and the music box is a great representation. A place that's basically in a deep sleep while under the rule of Zant. The instruments besides that are all alien-like, but are shared with the other Twilight-related places in the game for perfect theming. Halfway through, the vibe seems to change with instrument changes, but I find it weaker than the first half. It's a good song, but it doesn't have something that really jumps out to me as fantastic. The Wind Temple song reminds me a lot of Pikmin. I've wanted to say that for a lot of the entries up to this point, but I saved it for this one because it's the most like Pikmin to me. The guitar parts in this song are very good, and I love the little trills they do. I think the wind instruments get a little too repetitive after a while, and I wish the melodic wind parts were better because it's the Wind Temple, not the Strings Temple. Nitpicks aside, this is one of the best Wind Waker dungeon themes because it's quite fun to listen to. The strings are beautiful in Va Meadow. The way they crescendo for big moments is really nice. Later on in the dungeon, you can start to hear some high synths as the melody, which I found really interesting, as I associate Breath of the Wild with more natural instruments and piano. The final part of the song when the dungeon is almost complete is the best because the strings finally change and start playing staccato notes, which makes for a great change since they become rather stale with how much they repeat in the song's other parts. The best Wind Waker dungeon theme. It's a shame that Wind Waker has, in my opinion, the weakest dungeon song collection considering how fantastic the rest of the game's music is. This song features a didgeridoo, which means it's instantly better than the rest of the Wind Waker dungeon songs. The parts with the chord hits are also very nice and contrast well with the emptier parts of the song. In particular, the downwards wooden slides are very ear-catching. I don't exactly know what instrument it plays it, but it's really cool. The best dungeon in the game fittingly got the best of the dungeon songs. The Skyview Temple track is surprisingly intense for a first dungeon. The oboe is accentuated and quite nice as a main melodic instrument. The backing track with the heavy strings, choir, and timpani is also really great, but it does feel out of place. As a song, I enjoy it since it's varied and interesting to listen to. And as I said, I'm mostly taking into account how much I personally like a track when ranking, while explaining how I think it fits the theme. This is one of the instances where I don't think it fits the theme all that well, but I like it nonetheless. The water temple is very pretty. I assume many people probably have bad memories associated with this song, but I didn't struggle that much with the water temple personally. Something really cool about this song is that it uses descending notes thematically, as the dungeon is all about adjusting water levels and descending with the iron boots. There's also good variety with winds, strings, and the crystal sounds all acting as the melodic instrument for times, so it never gets boring. This is one of the most iconic and beautiful dungeon tracks in the whole franchise, and it's easy to see why. The rattling noise is super atmospheric, and the instrument choices are all very natural and ethereal. It gives the song an ominous and haunted feeling, which is perfect since the Forest Temple is haunted. Also, I'm fairly certain they use Link's vocal sounds as part of the song a little over a minute into the song. What this could mean symbolically, I don't really know, but it does make the song more intriguing and interesting to listen to. My only minor complaint, very minor, is that the wood rattling noise can become a little repetitive after a while. Gonna be honest, the only thing I can think of when I hear this track is the PBG clip where he says it reminds him of a game show where the song plays during the answering phase. The best part of the song, however, is the direct reference to the Great Deku Tree track from Ocarina of Time. The 4 rising notes on woodwinds are the exact notes from the Great Deku Tree, which is such a cool detail since Twilight Princess is very connected to Ocarina of Time, and the Temple of Time is meant to be a direct reference to the same location in Ocarina of Time. This is just a fun song to bounce along with thanks to the catchy 2-note melodies. The Spirit Temple is my favorite dungeon track from Ocarina of Time, which is nice considering this is considered the final main dungeon of the game. It has a clear and catchy melody and great balance between high and low end instruments. Many of the other Ocarina of Time dungeon tracks lean more into the Dodongo style, where it's more atmospheric and less catchy. That isn't a bad thing, as I explained, but it isn't what I personally want to listen to most of the time. The Spirit Dungeon does the best at being something that I would listen to regularly, since it's quite catchy. This is the longest song on the list, clocking in at 11.5 minutes. It's also the longest name because I decided not to go with the real Tears of the Kingdom dungeon names because they're all boring. All except this one, where the name doesn't really work, but is too late to turn back now. I think this is a really good desert track. It uses all the right instruments and chords to make the atmosphere work. This one does a lot better than the previous Tears of the Kingdom tracks because it builds up faster and stays strong for longer. The best part is when it gets incredibly cinematic near the end because it's a great build-up. Afterwards, however, it just gets really slow and ends pretty quick, which is a shame. Despite those issues, it's still a rich song in theming and very enjoyable. I'm separating the inside and outside of the sand ship because the tracks for both are different enough to justify it to me. The past and present versions, however, are similar enough that I decided to just go with the past versions as they're the more complete sounding ones. With all that said, I quite like this song. Skyward Sword has much more melodic and interesting songs than the other games in the dungeons, and that's the reason I love it. This track combines the age of the sand ship with the tech of the Lanayru past perfectly. The wooden percussion and melodic instruments mesh wonderfully with the synths, representing the time-shifting mechanics of the dungeon, and it's great. Even though the songs are separate, they're still very similar, so it was just a matter of which one I liked more. The inside of the sand ship has richer melodies and more variance in instrumentation, so it eked out the win. The percussion getting louder inside the sand ship as opposed to outside is a really cool touch. The synth melody here is really catchy and the way it uses slides is fun. It pairs well with the woodwind melodies that come after. Once again, mallet instruments are used often and I love mallets, so it improves in my ranking from that. Snow Peak Ruins track is unique amongst the Twilight Princess dungeon songs. Most of them focus on the low end and on being kinda spooky, whereas this track focuses on the high end with occasional low end parts to fill out the soundscape. It makes it feel more chilling for the ice dungeon, and I also like the rising notes acting as the chords, particularly in the part where they seem to go up chromatically, making for a dissonant noise. The oboe is also very warm and sounds to be playing only in a major key, which I interpret as being the warm, safe locations in the dungeon where the Yeti couple are to give you advice and soup. They also double up with one, staying major, whilst the other one sounds more minor. A super subtle hint that one of the Yeti couple will be the dungeon boss. Overall, the layers of theming with this song make it my favorite of the Twilight Princess dungeon tracks. Lost Garandia Rediscovered is way more interesting than the other Tears of the Kingdom dungeon songs. So many different instruments and sounds all doing their own thing, while a muted bass guitar keeps the beat alongside bongos, making it feel very free form. The second half of the song leans more into an identifiable melody, and it's a great change of pace to keep with the very long tracks in Tears of the Kingdom. New instruments are introduced all the time, and I especially like the echoey piano that had been absent for most of the song as it comes in near the end. It begins to feel like a full-on battle theme as it continues, which makes it much more memorable and the best Tears of the Kingdom dungeon theme by a landslide. This is the Divine Beast with the best starting track. All the other ones really show their best hand in the final parts, but Varudanya starts much stronger and keeps the energy up the whole time, whilst still adding new elements as you progress. It has the most memorable melodies of all the Divine Beasts, and it also uses the most mallets, so it gets bonus points. Easily the best Divine Beast track in the game because of how full-bodied it is, even at its weakest. What an incredible song for an incredible dungeon. All of the instruments sound elegant and spiritual. The strings and especially the gong-like noises. Absolutely fitting for the theme of the dungeon. They also sound ever so slightly watery since this acts as the water dungeon. The best parts are when the choir matches the melody. In particular, the part that plays at 1 minute and 20 seconds is fantastic. Taking a note from Ocarina of Time's Shadow Temple, many of the instruments end with upwards inflections, as if they are rising to the heavens. This of course also ties into the literal hell that lies underneath the dungeon. Surprisingly, the underworld area doesn't appear to have its own track from what I could find. Even so, it doesn't need a second track for this list because it already ranks so highly. Another Skyward Sword W. Like with the Sand Ship, the Lanayru mining facility has 2 different entries on this list. Unlike the Sand Ship, however, this is split between its old-timey present version and the futuristic past version. The tracks are different enough that I felt it was justified. Moving on, I love how old they make this song feel. The melodic instrument sounds like it's coming out of a rusted old speaker, which is amazing theming. There are also many wonderful mallet instruments present throughout most of the song. There is variety with the track having multiple sections and melodies, but it isn't as good as the past version. What a fantastic showing from the Lanayru region in Skyward Sword. The instruments in the past all sound to be in peak condition, and there is a new robotic droning sound which is perfect for the futuristic past of the facility. The melody also changes quite a bit, with many more short notes and pickup notes making it feel fresh. In contrast, the present version doesn't have those quick notes, as if it no longer has the structural integrity to be able to play them. That's a super cool attention to detail that improves the theming even further. Overall, it's just slightly catchier than the present version of the song because of all the additions, hence its higher ranking. The inverted Stone Tower Temple theme is a little difficult to talk about without having discussed its original version. As such, I'll discuss both of them at once when I get to the regular song. Just know they are both extremely good and fitting of the theme, but I enjoy the regular version slightly more. Alright, now I can discuss both of them at once. Stone Tower Temple is easily the best Majora's Mask dungeon song. The melody is incredibly catchy and there are lots of instruments to keep it interesting. It still keeps the Zelda vibes though with the low choir. The oboe-like instrument in particular makes this song stand out and is the best part of the song. Now, onto how they work as a pair. The normal version of this song has more low-end instruments, and even the high-end instruments stay pretty low. Inverted, almost every low instrument shifts to the high end. The normal song has oboe and flute take the melody, while guitar plays support. Inverted, the guitar takes the melody, while the flute plays the supporting role. Everything about these songs complement each other in an incredibly thematic and interesting way. They also, of course, share many similarities. The melody, for example, is very similar between them, and they also share the same flute solo near the end of the song, reminding listeners that this is still the same dungeon, despite everything that's changed. The reason I prefer the normal one is just because I like the balance it has between its instruments more. Oboe and flute melody is full and rich, whereas the guitar melody in the inverted version doesn't feel quite as full to me. The Earth Temple song is so good. The guitars are so punchy and fun, and there are so many instruments all adding to the theming. Bongos and shakers adding to the hot atmosphere, the use of the best subset of instruments with mallets, woodwinds taking the melody, which is super catchy by the way, and there are several different sections in the song and nothing overstays its welcome, so it never gets boring. There is a ton of depth in this song that you have to listen to it multiple times in order to catch it all. There's just too much to like in this song, an absolute favorite of mine. It was a really hard decision between this one and the first place. Both are incredible and both fit their themes perfectly. Even so, the number one spot was pretty clear to me early on. Despite there being 50 entries on the list, I'm pretty sure many people watching now know what the number one spot is thanks to process of elimination. I love everything about this song. All the instruments are fantastic, the chords are super pretty, it matches the theme by feeling hot but still regal as you are in a sanctuary. It has my favorite use of mallets in the series by far. The sitar is a staple for hot areas and it still sounds regal, plus the triplets it plays are treats for the ears. The glockenspiel works fantastically as an occasional high-end instrument, and there are the little woodwind flourishes to round out the end of the song, giving it a wild edge and representing the vegetation that has somewhat overtaken the dungeon. I said before that Lanayru had a strong showing for dungeon themes, but Skyward Sword's rendition of Eldin took both top spots in my list. Ironic considering it has pretty decidedly the worst second visit dungeon of the three main areas. This song is so catchy and fun, it was an easy top choice for me. Skyward Sword is my favorite Zelda game, and it has by far my favorite selection of dungeon music in the series. As such, it's going to be the main inspiration for my original Zelda dungeon composition. During the making of this list, I was also taking into account what I believe makes a dungeon theme. What was used most often? What aspects did I like or dislike? What themes are more open to new interpretations? With all these things comes ideas. Not just for the song, but for what the dungeon could look like. In the end, here's what I came up with. Skyward Sword is my favorite Zelda game, so the dungeon will take place in that game. Ice dungeons are a rarity in Zelda, with only the Snow Peak Ruins and Snowhead Temple holding that spot, so I will make an ice dungeon theme. Choir and woodwinds are the most often used instruments from what I heard. Sound effects and flourishes are also used non-stop in almost every dungeon theme. Dungeon themes are generally slower paced and mysterious. Good dungeon themes tie into their setting deeper than just the vibes, such as with instrumentation or composition. Taking all these aspects into account, here's what I've created. Alongside it, I provided my own dungeon and boss ideas to look at and read. So please enjoy my original dungeon song, Frostfell Citadel. Thank you so much for watching. This was a really fun video to make. It also took longer than most of my other videos I've made, so it was a really big project for me. I want to make more rankings in the future as it's really fun, but it is a lot of work, especially when song numbers get higher than like 20. So if you have any ideas for song lists I should rank, leave it in the comments below. Thank you.